Hey everybody, welcome back to Tapestry Final Thoughts.
Ready, steady, play.
Ready, steady, play with Mike and Ollie. We spent so long building civilizations that we lost one. But if you guys haven't seen Tapestry, this is of course the civ building game from Stonemaier Games, and it is relatively sort of light on upfront rules. That's the sort of the one of the unique selling points. It's a 4-page rulebook, but then there's sort of a lot going on once you sort of start getting involved in it. And what you're basically doing is sort of playing a lot of mini games, and you're going to take your civilization takes form over a period of 5 eras. Each era is like an income phase where you're going to get points and resources based on what you've decided to do. And then you're going to use those resources to engage in building up these boards here, in exploring this island here, in putting out more of these little guys here, and scoring points in general.
Yep.
And collecting cards and things like that. There's a whole mini game that's putting out the tiles, and a whole nother one that's putting out these monuments onto the tiles. So as you go through each era, you're going to get more and more resources and more points, and the whole thing's going to escalate until you get to the 5th income turn, which is your final turn of the game, and you're going to get a bunch more points, and then you're out, and everyone else gets to keep going until they reach their 5th, and then the game is over, and whoever has the most points is the winner.
Yes.
And there's a lot of card play. Everyone's got a civilization card at the beginning that gives them asymmetrical powers.
Yep, special abilities, and
they're all very
rules.
distinct.
Very.
Now, Ollie's was to build up his board here, which he's done very well.
Stolen dystopian artifacts and all.
Mine was to put out these little houses here, and Chris's. His one was to use these cubes to advance up a track. Yeah, I mean, it's actually really funny because I think that yours is quite complex, whereas Chris's and ours are relatively simple. But I've seen them vary greatly. There's one of them actually that's really cool. I can't remember which one it's called, but what you do is you've got all 4 of the advancement tracks that you're advancing up, all printed on the card. And what you do is that whenever you take an income phase, you put this down on one of the tracks, and if your advancement level on the track matches the cube at the end of the income phase, you get loads of bonus points. So you have to predict where you're going to end up.
That's very difficult and thinky.
Well, I was talking to someone who was looking at it the last time we played, and they said that looking at it before we played, they thought it was going to be impossible, so they didn't choose it. Yeah. But then they said after the game they thought it might be more doable, but it strikes me as quite hard. Whereas mine's very simple. It's just do one of the things you do anyway and get bonus points for it.
Fair enough.
So Chris is gone.
Yes.
But he told us to say that he didn't like the game because theme doesn't inform mechanisms, which is a criticism that a lot of people have made of the game. We won't be the first ones to say it here. And for Chris, I think theme is a really important thing. So for him, it really stuck in his sort of mouth that... I was going to say craw.
Proverbial craw.
Yeah. The game does seem quite abstract. There's a lot of sort of things happening, but ultimately you're just making choices about how to spend your resources to advance up these tracks and choosing when to do it. So it's mostly like sort of an action selection game with sort of resource management and timing, really. Timing's a really important element.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, from our playthrough, there's not a great deal of player interaction other than who's taking these first or burning them, who is advancing up these to get the one-time benefits first.
Well,
and,
if you guys had explored the island faster, then there would have been some player interaction.
Reason to.
Yeah, I know.
I
was just upset because I wanted this achievement and I couldn't get it because no one was building out. I did it in the final.
I did it in the final moments after you had finished your last turn.
Yeah, I was out of the game when you started going out, and you still avoided me. Yeah, rude.
Island paradise, dude. I had no interest in the hinterlands.
Yeah, it makes no odds.
No, but that's the thing I found funny about it was for the amount of table space this takes up, I avoided it almost entirely.
Yeah, Ollie basically did nothing on this board, even though it's the central board.
Yeah.
And I did say to you, it is...
I took your advice to heart. Don't focus on the conflict.
Well, it is functionally 2 mini-games, right? One of them is you've got these hands of tiles, which you have different resources and sides on.
That's the one I held on to for the entire game.
And every time you put these out, you're going to get points for the edges that you match up, and also a resource based on the symbol in the middle. So, and that's one mini-game. And then the other one is where you take your monuments and put them out on the tiles, and then you get to roll some dice and get some bonuses for what you roll. And you can also knock over other people's civilization, and that is a very small element of player interaction. And actually, you get these nope cards as well,
Traps.
called trap cards. Oh, yep.
I was holding on to one.
I guess they're all the same.
Yes.
Interesting. You can sort of play this as a gotcha card when someone tries to knock you over and stop them from knocking you over. But I've played this twice and never seen anyone play it.
To be fair, I had that from the second to last turn, and my playstyle meant if I needed to use it, I was already screwed. But I have to admit, I found it funny just how much time we spent on these boards.
Yeah. Well, these are like the whole game.
Yeah, but compared to how much space they're taking up on the board, that's most of the game. Mm-hmm. And for me, because of the faction I chose, this was the rest of the game for me. It was just here and there. Middle bit's totally pointless to me. And even when you finally got these star tiles, you only got to play 3 of them.
Well, you only ever get to play 3 of them.
But you had no competition for that. I basically abandoned it early on and never went back. But I'm glad I went for the technology, because interesting things happen, which I like. I like the fact that these all feel viable.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you don't specialise in one, you will feel the disbenefit a lot.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, Chris specialised to an extent. He made it to the end of almost 2 of them.
Yeah.
And he
made it to the end of 1 and almost the end of that.
Yeah, exactly. And he's further up on the military track than you.
Well,
although,
not if you add me both up.
Yeah, but it's about the cost, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much covered the cost of where he got to by the end of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you didn't have this one at all, then you'd have 3 resources, so you could be with him.
Yeah.
So, then he's ahead of you on this track as well. So he actually beat you on all tracks, even though he was about 50, 60 points behind you in score. Which is actually more than that.
Yeah.
But, which is interesting. Well, no, it is about 50. But, what's interesting is that that says to me that it's not just about, how far you can get up these tracks or which ones you choose. You know, I mean, by the end of the game, I think it would be hard not to get to the end of at least one of them.
I think if you hadn't, you'd been actively avoiding finishing it.
Yeah, because like I said, Chris is like basically halfway up 2 and almost at the end of 2, right? I didn't use science at all.
Yes, you theocratic even.
I was like, by science, I didn't put out like any of these buildings, and yet I've almost drawn with you. So
well, I think this helped quite a bit.
There's like
those double stackings.
Yeah.
Those were some very good combos.
Yeah, they were so. Well, I was looking for a lot of combos. I mean, I was the only one that really had a lot of experience with this game prior to this, and so I got to sort of explore that and sort of put out all these combos and stuff like that. And I think in a way you were quite lucky getting the architects, because you don't have a lot of previous experience with this, but the architects is basically like, this is really valuable, just do this lot.
Yes, do this and do it properly. Yeah, and even then I managed to screw it up a couple of times.
Well, your score says otherwise.
No, but it just goes to show, like, if you've got a bit more experience with it, it can really jump away.
Oh yeah, this board is really tricky, and I think it's actually kind of, again, much like this game, it's a sort of thematic disconnect. It doesn't really feel...
Yeah, and they are asymmetric boards as well.
Yeah, they're asymmetric, yeah. There's 6 of them in the box, but if you're playing with 3 players, you choose one set of 3 and deal them out randomly.
Fair enough.
So you're either tropical, mountains and wetlands, or forest, plains and something. Anyway, desert, I think. But, and there is actually a 6-player slot in this game. So it's a 2 to 5 player game, but there's definitely a 6th player coming. There's a Tapestry expansion already in production, which is probably the 6th player expansion with more bells and whistles.
Yeah. I am curious. I felt we were scoring quite highly, and we're not even we've barely broken the halfway mark on the scoreboard.
That's true, although Jamie Stegmeyer did say that 300 points was a really good score. And we are not far off it, I guess. I mean, I scored about 50 points more than last time, and I won my last game on like 180, so...
True, but considering that the max score is 499 before you run off the board...
Yeah. But, and I do wonder how much of that is... Because as I said, like I played before, I played again and I improved. And I both times I've had very distinctly different strategies.
Oh, that's good.
So there is some element of strategy to the game, including sort of resource management and timing windows and all of that. But on the other hand, I do feel like there's a lot of randomness in the game. You know? Like you were saying, you're 4 points ahead of me, and you did these 3 explores and got 18 points for it, and you could just as easily have had 12. In fact, it was more likely you would have 12 than 18, which would have swung the game back in my favor by 2 points. So I'm picking one very isolated example just to sort of prove a grander point, which is that, again, like these tiles are random, all of that's random, this is random, this is random, and for a game that takes still, even though it's a 4-page rulebook, it's still a 2-hour play, maybe more if people are being really cognitive about it, although I don't think it's actually that cognitive a game, really. No. It's the thing of what the randomness gives to it is it gives everyone sort of this sense of sort of hope, right? Like, people aren't going to make bad decisions and get completely demoralized. Yeah. I think actually it's funny in a way, it's the more argent Eurogamers who will find that demoralizing than new players or more casual players, which is really interesting because it doesn't feel like a casual game.
No, this feels quite... It seems a lot simpler going into it, but the amount you have to figure out and start scoring, and in the right order as well, is a lot to think through. Yeah. And this was where you, having played it before, helped a lot, because there's a couple of times I was looking going, I'm not entirely sure how to add my score up. Mm. And there's a lot to take in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the rulebook's 4 pages, but it doesn't explain any of this iconography, really. No. I mean, well, it does a bit, the basics, but... it gives you the tools to figure this out, but, until you have to learn what these icons mean and it's then how best to utilize them.
It's unforgiving in a way because you can end up scuttling yourself by misinterpreting one of the symbols that you don't want to ask about because you don't want to give your strategy away. Mm. And considering how often you get stuff like this where it's do a thing that you
this is random, these are like...
I mean, in this case, it's a good one because it's you don't get the bonus after rolling the dice of wherever you end up on, but then sometimes it's there, and that's a fairly good indication of not getting something, but you don't actually. It's not clear what you're not getting. You're almost looking at it and go, "Well, I'm not rolling the dice."
And do I not roll the dice then?
Yeah, and there's a good few times where we just had to consult the rulebook and go, "I've no idea what this means. I've moved on to this tile." It could be really good for me. It could be really bad for me.
Well, having said that, I played it once and internalized all of it.
Yeah, but it came back to me in terms of your first game. It's just a bit of a wall.
Yeah, but I played it a while ago. Actually, I've played several games and shot several videos since then, and so I've retained it quite well. So the iconography is quite good once you get. After.
Yeah, it's a high curve on your first game. Your second game, I think, as you say, a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but I think that makes it sort of coming back to this point about the Argent sort of traditional Eurogamers.
Yeah,
it's like it's not really for them because it's got all of this randomness. These dice, so many dice, all these decks of cards, all of these tiles and things. And I guess you could argue that enough randomness kind of averages out. But the thing is, there's like moments.
I play dice games. I have rolled too many ones to go it averages out.
Well, there are these clinch moments where it's like, where like sometimes you're taking an action and doing something and then you roll really well and you're like, well, that's not very useful. Mm. And other times, you're like, if I roll this one thing now, this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that can be quite frustrating. And, it gives you some ways to mitigate it, a little bit, but not really. The ways to mitigate it are get more cards or...
or get to this point where you can go back on a row and try again.
Yeah, which is... that's very difficult to do.
It is very difficult, but there's about 4 ways that I've seen in our game. Mm. And it's to get the singularity, start a row again, get to there, go back and start over again... Time travel. Yeah, there was another card.
I think somewhere they're quite difficult to run.
But it almost seems like they've been intentionally made very difficult so that you don't rely on it because you still use the resources to do it in the first place.
But it's still a lot to do for a casual gamer.
Oh God, yeah.
It's a lot for like a sort of even like someone who's sort of coming into the game and playing some middleweight games. Mm. So I'm a bit like, who is this for?
Yeah.
If it's sort of a bit too much or not meaty enough for your Argent Eurogamer, it almost seems like a sort of a pleasant distraction for hobby gamers. Do you know what I mean? This is like the kind of game where it's just satisfying enough. Yeah, exactly. This is almost like a beer and pretzels Civ game, which is such a sort of peculiar thing. You know,
I mean, we did. No, I joked at the start that I was expecting to see Gandhi and nuclear weapons to show up because it just made me think of Civilization and Colonization, the games, and it's like
it's nothing like those though.
No, but it superficially.
Superficially, yes, and I think that does it a big disservice because it's quite an expensive game. If you're buying this at retail, it's $100. Damn. So it's not cheap, right? I mean, and it's got all this bling. It looks like $100 game.
Yeah.
The card stock's really nice. Look at all these buildings, these plastic bits. Look at these
pre-painted
landmarks, exactly. You know, and these are all extremely satisfying and very pleasing. But then, you know, they don't actually play that big a role in the game, and these bases are not ideal for their purpose.
No, I haven't.
Especially these little round ones.
I have issue with the fact that we had to go by this to actually figure out.
I feel like they only included that board because the bases aren't better.
Well, it's like this, for example. It would fit in a 3 space, but it's meant to be a 4 by 4.
Yeah, that's actually the worst culprit of the whole, I think.
It's so far off of the space it's going to be in, and it actually annoyed me a bit where I had to keep checking to see how it would fit.
Yeah, that. I don't. I actually tried to correct you because I thought you were doing it wrong.
Yeah,
you know, which is nuts.
Yeah, I don't quite understand why they know it's got to fit on those squares. Why they didn't square off the base more?
Yeah, so I think for $100 game, and you only get one set of dice with the core set. I just actually bought the extra dice from the company because I wanted them. But I pre-ordered it, the first printing, so I got it for $70. So it was cheaper.
Yeah.
And I think at $70, this is actually not a terrible purchase, but I am struggling to recommend it because I'm just like, who is it for? When would you get it out? Yeah. It feels a bit like this sort of idling diversion it's got enough sort of random chance that there are sort of moments of, ooh, you know, that elation you get from something lucky happening, and that's quite pleasing, but there are other games that do that too, and I think they do it better.
I find it funny that in other games of this style, these decks would be broken down a bit so that you don't have quite the amount of anachronism in it. So you have like the first era, these are your market cards, these are your Tapestry cards.
I mean, I feel like they fully embraced the anachronism. Yeah. Because I was just going to say, I'll let you get back to your point in just a second, but obviously, like, there are these tracks on our income boards, and these, you will remove buildings from these tracks here, and you'll unlock these technologies. And then you've got the actual technology cards here that you'll get, and you can get these technology cards at any time.
You can unlock neural implants before you've discovered a library.
And furthermore, you can, and then these are all technologies as well if you care to read them. So you got like scouting there and rafts there, you see, and this goes all the way up to warp gates for space, right?
And this starts at pottery and then ends up at the singularity.
Yeah, singularity. But because everything's sort of out of order, and like I managed to get to warp gates without ever discovering astronomy
or science
entirely. At all. I built a rocket ship without ever actually having
wing and a prayer, dude.
I've no medicine.
Yeah,
I don't have medicine. That's why I had to get breeding and fertility. But
which I'm still at Hunter.
Yeah, you don't even have breeding. So how on earth did you last 5 epochs?
Virtual reality, biometrics, and neural implants.
I think your people are just singularities. You've become AI.
Yeah,
you gave your physics, but the thing is, and that's what I was going to say. Like sometimes when you get these kinds of things, where you get this sort of, and this happens all in Kingdom Death Monster, where these things are more abstract. They're sort of concepts. And then you get this emergent storytelling because you sort of start filling in the blanks. But this is the opposite of that because it's very stark. Like these things are all very, very clear. This is not abstract at all. It's very clear what this is. Instead, it just creates these huge anachronisms, which you either take with a grain of salt and laugh at, like we were, or if you're a much more thematically minded, literal person like Chris, they just really make you crazy.
Yeah, which was funny because, I mean, I'm a student of history, absolutely love it, but I also love the sort of retro future punk aspect of literature where you just mash stuff together, be like, right, you haven't discovered the written language, however, you've developed video games. And it's just silly things like that, but you've got to, that depends so much on who you are, and you've got to work at it.
Yeah.
And
I know if Chris were here, he would say that it's terrible. He would say it's unforgivable, I think.
But that's where I go back to in other games of this style that I play, each age would have its own deck and it would construct it to be more balanced for what comes out.
Well, I think a very obvious comparison for this, and I can't remember, you played this, is Through the Ages.
Yeah, that's where I was getting the example from.
Yeah.
So in Through the Ages, you have your age decks, and each one of them is... You get to use this in the first age. Once it's advanced, those cards are worthless to you because they're too old.
Yeah.
But obviously in this, they might go, well, you can still use the old ones because they still have a purpose, like a calendar showing a... I'm going to go with Ancient Civilization A, because I have no idea if that's even real language.
Yeah, what is that even? Nobody knows.
I mean, it could be cuneiform, but who the hell knows? Let me know if you actually recognise it. I'll hold it in front of the camera. But the conditions on that card are good all the way through the game, but I do feel that depending on how lucky you are with how they come out and in what order, that can really swing a game.
Well, where's that card that you bought? The bakery. Can you find the bakery for me?
Oh, I discarded. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bakery.
So what's interesting about the bakery...
And the treasury. And the light
is
bulb.
that obviously upgrading all of these cards costs exactly the same. Technology upgrades all happen the same way. So the Calm Tower is actually just a better version of the treasury. Sorry, the treasury. Because it's worth...
Bakery's the same. It's the one below it.
Yeah, it's worth more points, and the building's bigger.
Yeah.
So this is more useful in every way than this one, and that's just blatantly imbalanced.
Well, the silly thing for that is, it wouldn't be blatantly imbalanced, except you can build things off of the board. So the size of their footprint doesn't hinder you ever.
Well, it does, actually, because it makes them more difficult to place in the board to optimize. Like, when I got the tank factor, I could do nothing with it because of the red dots.
True, but that might have been when you forgot to bring it out earlier.
No, I actually... my board state hadn't changed at all.
Fair enough.
So there is that element.
True. But what I meant was, for this one, for example, the huge one, I deliberately put it an entire square off of the board.
Yeah, you lost 4 of the spaces it can occupy.
Yeah.
So oftentimes you can't really optimize when these buildings come down here. So it's more about finding the optimal position when you finally get them.
Yeah.
I think that if you were really cognitive about it, you might be able to do it, but oftentimes it will be at the sacrifice of something else, which I guess is as it should be. But unless you're the architects doubling up all the bonuses from these, it's probably not worth that level of attention.
Yeah, I feel like most other teams would, because you were barely paying attention to it, and I know Chris
I had like 4 rows. I got like 4 points out of it.
Chris made a few, but he had no reason to be orderly in how he did it. It was just like, where's going to get me the immediate benefit?
Yeah.
So
I was more into getting the resources during the course of the game.
Whereas I was directly incentivized to get the rows and the resources. So where I could have just gone, right, I only need to put 2 down here, I only need to put down 3 down here, I only need to put 1 down here.
Yeah. What I like is that the Architects gives you that incentive to work on it, and it gives you that sort of clear path to victory. I think that and I often say this about games, when you're given a complete sandbox, and a good example of this is actually Caverna, which is a Uwe Rosenberg game. It's a bit like Agricola, but less bleak, and also you don't have the building upgrades. The upgrades are a board that you select from. So basically what this means is that instead of having restricted marketplace, you have a completely open marketplace. And people often find at the beginning of Caverna, they just don't know where to go and what to pick. They're like, what is my strategy for this game going to be? I have everything on the table.
How do I play this game? Seriously.
Yeah. And it's like, well, you have to pick a strategy. And it's like, well, how do I pick a strategy? I have too many choices. So the militants are basically like, get your monuments out on the board. And that means I need to do explorers, and then I need to do militaries.
Yep.
And Chris's leaders...
2 areas you focused on almost exclusively.
In a way, Chris's leaders was actually the least useful board. And so it's interesting that he came last in the game. Because, again, his board was like, each era, you can advance 1 space. So that's just another timing consideration in a game that already has a lot of them. And, so it's still leaving him very open to adopt any particular strategy. And as a result, he kind of just did a bit of everything, and he came last.
I liked the concept of the game, but it was a bit of a slog.
Did you find it a slog? Because I played it twice now, and I find it completely inoffensive.
No, inoffensive, but it was a bit of a slog trying to get my head around. If you hadn't been helping me calculate scores, I would have just gone lost. Yeah. Because it was just a lot to take in. I think it would be a lot easier for me the second playthrough.
It's definitely more enjoyable the second time you play it. I actually think it's one of those games that's sort of... I reckon, because it's got so much randomness, but there is a definite sort of like strategic puzzly element.
Yeah.
I think that it gets more compelling the more you play it, because every time you're going to be like, I want to figure out this puzzle. But then because there's so much randomness, the puzzle changes every time, and then you never really can figure it out. There's never going to be an optimal way to play this, because the civilizations are so important and completely random. This board is important and really random. So in terms of replayability, it's huge. But I don't know. I think a lot of people would become dissatisfied because they're going to feel like they're playing it all the time and not necessarily getting better.
Yeah.
There is definitely a skill scope, but I just don't know how much there is before you hit the roof of randomness.
Before you hit the luck barrier.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one I wanted. Roof of randomness. Luck barrier is better.
You feel free to use it. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'd probably play this again if it came out, but I would be very wary of if it was someone's first time playing and it's now not mine, because...
Well, I think the luck does a good step of mitigating
the luck
that.
does good, but it means that I'm going to have... like what you did, essentially. You have to remember...
I might be interested in creating like 2 pools of civilizations. So like for someone playing their second or third game, I might give them the leaders.
Yeah,
and then give the architects to someone who's new.
This is something I would... in some other games where the civilization is random, there's no complexity rating. And I do think there is a definite difference between some of them as to how easy they are to play. Well, I wonder if that would be...
That's a really good thing about Dice Throne. Dice Throne is this Yahtzee-style fantasy fighting game where everyone takes on the role of one hero, and then you duke it out in a free-for-all or a team game or even just head-to-head, which is the best version of it. But what's great about that is every hero, and there's like 20 of them or something, they all have a complexity rating on 1 to 6.
Yeah.
And that makes it really, really easy to give like a new player a really simple hero. And then if you're like quite experienced, you can take a much more complex one. And I really value that.
Yeah.
I think that's hugely important. And I think that was one of the things they really failed with in the, for example, the Hellboy game Kickstarter. I said that in my final thoughts on that. I was like, there is so much in this Kickstarter box, so many sort of bits you can just plug into the game. And yet it's
you have no idea how hard that's going to make it or how easy it's going to be.
Yeah, you have no idea where you're setting the difficulty level out for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and so for this, I think, having a complexity rating on each of the civilizations would actually be really great for if you're playing with a very varied group. And I think that's kind of where the game sort of fits best, because I think if you've got a bunch of hobby gamers or sort of like Euro type gamers, then this is not the game for that group. And if everyone's a newbie and a casual, it's also not the game for that group. So, you know, as a sort of a hybrid that can incorporate a varied group, I think that's where it fits, but I do think it's too expensive for that placement.
Fair enough.
And like I said, there's going to be 1 or 2 people, maybe, who are just totally triggered by the anachrony and the anachronisms and the lack of the lack of sort of thematic marriage, you know. It was the same theme that people, same criticisms people had about Scythe as well.
True, but I think as well, like one of Chris's criticisms, very legitimate. This is not helpful for him at all with colourblindness.
Oh yeah,
that was a massive issue, and I'm surprised. I mean, silly thing for me. To me, these are very distinct.
Yeah,
but I am not the person to be judging that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He said quite a lot of the time he can't tell what this is. He can't see where
they
the
could definitely be a lot more distinct.
Yeah, but
and it wouldn't really change much.
It seems like a very obvious hole to fall in, and
especially when you've got them as little symbols like this, that makes it much more difficult, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm
a little bit surprised by that, considering that there's some area like the pie chart is very distinct. I mean, as far as I can tell, he didn't seem to have any issue with it. No. But then we also had some coloured buildings didn't match up with the colour.
Yeah, we were curious that the technology track in yellow matches with the yellow buildings. Yeah. The military track in red matches with the red buildings. But the science track is green, and there's no green buildings. It uses the brown buildings.
Yeah.
And then the exploration track is blue, and it uses the... No, it uses the... I'm mixing it up now!
Yeah.
The exploration track is blue and uses the brown buildings, and the science building is green and uses the grey buildings. Yeah. And why is that like that?
It seems a very odd...
Was the blue and green plastic really expensive?
Whoa. We'll find out.
Yeah, it seems very peculiar because... Yeah, well, I was going to say maybe it was a conscious effort to avoid clash with the player colours, but it's not because, you know, red. You know, so I thought that was quite peculiar. I don't understand why they've done that. And if I had more time to produce these videos, I'd actually reach out to Jamie and ask him for a comment on it. But we're moving on. So
yeah, you know. I mean, bits of it I liked. I like the models. I like that they've gone, well, we could have just had this as a 2D representation, but that's boring. Let's give you a 3D model.
Yeah, those are great. The production value is by and large great, as with most of his games, like Wingspan and Scythe and all of the others, Charterstone. These are all of these boards that you use for your player boards. You have this sandpaper finish that just stops plastic pieces sliding around easily, and that's really good and really nice. Everything has this nice quality to it.
Yeah, it's a very finished product.
Like, you can see where the money you spent went.
Yeah. It's
just, like I said, it's just kind of a shame that, it promises so much, and yet doesn't really, and in a way does itself a disservice, because it's so pretty and so grandiose. You expect this big grand thing, and then it's really not that at all. It really is just this much more basic thing, which it's not necessarily a bad thing, like I said, but it sort of belies expectations.
Yeah, and if you went into this game from what the box showed you, you would be expecting
something more like Through the Ages.
Yeah, you'd be expecting a different experience.
This really vicious, long civilization building game, And I love the idea of a civilization building game with a 4-page rulebook, but I think the reason it doesn't exist is because, well, this is the final game, and it feels like this bizarre hybrid that doesn't really fit anywhere. So, yeah, I think my conclusion's actually the same as yours. It's kind of like a fun diversion. I'm quite happy to play it, I guess, but it really is only in that... if someone got it out and they really wanted to play it, I wouldn't be like, no, put it away.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, let's play that.
I'd be like, is there not anything else you'd rather play? Like, there's so many good games, there's so many I'd much rather play than this. But I think that, if I was, with a couple of hobby gamers, and then someone who is more casual or less experienced, I might say, okay, yeah, this is a good choice. But it's a very expensive thing for a very niche opportunity of play.
Yeah, definitely. So, that sums up for me.
Yeah.
But, I mean, don't get me wrong. I did have fun playing this. So
I think that's because you and I found the anachronisms very amusing.
Yes.
We made our own fun with those.
Yeah, I still love the fact that I'm a hunter-gatherer society with virtual reality.
I mean, that's super amusing.
Yep.
And I never, in fact, invented currency at all. I was a bartering society right up until I went exploring space.
Oh, yeah, but I had credit cards before I had a written language.
I never invented language. I just did sign language the whole time.
That's an impressive theocracy you had going.
Yep. All hail the Church of Victory Points.
I mean, clearly...
Victory Points.
Fair enough. Clearly, the dystopia of Renaissance tycoons on their island paradise got lucky at the end.
I'm trying to do a P. It's really hard.
Yeah.
All hail the Church of VPs.
I'll give you that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episodes, though, and if you've stuck around for this long...
Thank you. You're very dear to our hearts.
Indeed.
And
I
hope this has been helpful and informative in helping you decide what this is all about. There's going to be a lot of support for this game because that's what they do over at Stonemaier Games. And we'll be back tomorrow for a completely different adventure.
Join us then.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.